property if there's going to be a railway line going through it. So when will we know exactly what your determined line is?
So in essence, ma'am, the property still stays in your hand at the current moment. And you can sell it when you want to sell it. The only time the order they call it that we will be to...
anything and disclose anything that we know is coming forward in the future. So, frankly, if it was me, I wouldn't even consider buying a property with a railway line going through it, not even a portion of it. So where does that put us, who are aged and want to possibly scale down and, yeah, where does it put us?
Okay, there's a question there at the back.
I'm in a position where I've actually, with the current information, it looks like a part of the station will be on our property, my parents' property. And we've had it in the market for a couple of months now, and unfortunately we're not attracting buyers. We are attracting buyers, but as soon as they hear about the potential development, it's, you know, we receive a negative reaction. And my parents are, you know, they have to move into a retirement home fairly soon, so they can't wait 5 years or 6 years, etc. How do we deal with that?
Okay. So by its nature, as Victor had explained earlier on, the point at which we can actually start talking about a sale and us talking about compensation is when the land has already been proclaimed, and then we now have the design in place. Now, it is the nature of what do they call it, of a project like this, that it would take that long, and therefore it would be only at the end of the design that we then are able to say these are the properties that are affected. At the current moment, to be honest, everybody is actually speculating about where exactly the line is a 400-meter wide servitude, and it can move away completely from your property, or it can move into the property in detail, and that in itself, by its nature, without a full design, and you have to consider that without a design, I cannot be able to say this is the property that is affected. That I cannot say. And in essence, look, you know, we have tried by all means over the last 10 years. I mean, this is our 10th year. We've had a clean audit as an organization, and we've tried by all means to keep our nose clean. So I am not going to get involved in something that could actually ended up with us saying, no, we will pay for your properties now. And in essence, the truth is, I can only commit to paying to properties once the design has been done. I do understand the issues you are raising, but this is where I sit. I sit with the need for me to do the design, and then ultimately get to a point where I have the clarity of mind of which of the properties are actually affected, and therefore those are the properties that we're dealing with. And for me, the challenging conversation here is that I wish I could give you better answers than what I'm giving you, but that is the process and that's the law. And I have to follow the law. I have kept my nose clean in the 25 years that I've been in the railroad, and I am not going to start now by being reckless. I still have to follow process and follow the due process that is there. There's still another question in the back there.
Yeah. If I hear you correctly, once the design has been approved, people in my situation, can we then start engaging with you if our property is affected?
If your property is affected, sir.
Okay.
And you will be notified in full, and as what we call it, as the issue has been raised, the postal service is not the best way of doing it. We will use a courier, but the 21 days gets activated the day you sign for the letter that you have received it. It's not any other time. It's the day that you receive. And then if you send us a note and saying, no, the 21 days is not enough, I would like to consult my lawyer and all sorts of other things. And that's what most people did when we did this the first time. Then that's how we dealt with it.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to ask you a question. On the map you showed us, you have 3 lines.
Yes.
You haven't decided on any of those lines yet.
So we have decided on one of the lines, which is a center line. And I'll show you how we got to there. So that's the whole point of this presentation. It's how we decided and how each of those lines in certain parts don't work, in certain parts they work. What we ended up with was actually a modified combination, a hybrid of all the lines that were on that page rather than one of them.
Okay, because we haven't seen that.
Okay, so the line he was showing earlier on, but then we will have it shared and make sure that the one that I showed you earlier on that is actually shown over the properties will be shared with you.
Okay. And can I ask just one more question?
Yeah.
Have you considered the land that was expropriated and paid for by the government years ago, which I think is the PWV 3 and 5 lines?
Yes,
Why
ma'am.
is that not being
I will
considered?
show you just now in the environmental analysis. In actual fact, that land is of no use, most likely to anybody, because of the environmental issues. Part of it actually sits in areas where we cannot build anything. So there's lands that support other ecological areas. There are important areas, but I'll go through the slides just now, ma'am. And one of the things that we had to consider was sending the line into that reserve. And in most cases, it actually created a much deeper ecological and what do they call it, an environmental impact than the line that actually we sort of created out of the hybrid of everything. Can I go through this and then finish it off? Okay. So, in essence, I'm going to run through the station location issues. This is Cosmo City, and which is more like the area where you guys are, and these are the things that we needed to consider overall in terms of location, the area of the proposed PWV as you had raised now, the educational institutions that are there, the businesses that are supporting the area overall, and then the residential areas that are in and around the area. And then this is Randburg. Randburg in itself will follow the same process, and then ultimately looked at the mobility routes. And Randburg in itself ends up with us, considering multiple options. Are we bringing down buildings? Are we raising up new buildings? And also the other things that are there. Now, the environmental screening approach and the geological sensitivity maps that we had to use, it was for us to identify a preferred route, consider environmental legal requirements, and likely the specialist studies that will be required. We're not yet at the point where we've considered the specialist studies. The specialist studies will be part of, so the main EIA will occur, and then underneath that there will be the specialist studies that occur. So we're not yet there. So, a lot of people tend to say, have you done this and that? No, we did what's called a desktop study, and in terms of the environmental screening, it says for us to identify any particular fatal flaws, and I'll show you some of them relating to the PWV, going on to the PWV or not going on to the PWV, because some of it is just a pure fatal flaw. It's like I couldn't cut into that much of it, an environmentally sensitive area, and be comfortable with it. And then it also then creates the duty of care. So the duty of care in it says every person who causes or has caused or may cause significant pollution or degradation of an environment must take reasonable measures to prevent such pollution or degradation from occurring, continuing or, this is legal speak and it gets written in tautology. Insofar as such harm to the environment is authorized by law and cannot be reasonably be avoided or stopped, to minimize and rectify such pollution and degradation of the environment. This is an important issue because it's not only an issue of it. So first is you must minimize it. So the amount by which you cut through an environmentally sensitive. Certain cases you cannot do anything, and I'll show you just a little bit later. And then once you've minimized it, then the next bit of it is can the area be replaced somewhere else? And in certain cases, and in places where we were considering taking the PWV route, the amount of replacement was impossible. And in actual fact, there wouldn't be a piece of legislation that we could even lean against to be able to allow that to happen. Now, this is the area we're talking about overall, and As we look through it, the line runs from Marlborough, so everybody always asks, there's already a railway line there. Why would you build an additional railway line next to the existing airport line? So the airport line at the current moment runs 3 services in it. It runs the airport service, it runs the north-south, and then runs the east-west service in it. And once the east-west has been decoupled and the north-south and what do they call it, and the airport service then now runs from Otia to Lanseria, then the amount of traffic in that tunnel will not be able to, the tunnel becomes too small for us to use it for that. So we actually need to replicate the tunnel next to it to take some of the services that sits on this line and bring them across into this line, because the volume of traffic that occurs once we've built this other line here is quite heavy. Now, we had to consider, the literature and the Constitution in itself talks to about everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful, and, to have the environment that is protected, reasonable legislation that prevents pollution and ecological issues. And then these are all the other documents that we had to consider: the National Development Plan, the medium-term strategic framework, the Millennium Development Goals, and the climate change bills, the Green Book, the Green Transport Strategy, the National Water Act, and all the other National Environmental Management Acts on waste, on biodiversity, on the Air Quality Act, the resources and everything else. And in addition to that, we had to take into cognizance the municipal bylaws. So for us to be able to create the implications of this is that, can we create sustainable long-term human communities? Prescribed principle of duty of care still has to be to the ecosystems and ecosystems that occur. And I want to get to the diagrams that you actually want to see what the challenges are. Now, ultimately, the issues of implementing a project in a manner that engages all spheres of government in order to provide an integrated, reasonable climate change issues, steer the development of the direction where it has minimum or manageable impacts all around, and then a modal shift in rail. Now, we have what we call GIS, environmental sensitivity maps, and those environmental sensitivity maps don't get published by us. They are published by the Department of Environmental Affairs. All we do, we reference them to be able to check if in the areas that we call it, and whether they are current or not current at the current moment is a different issue, and that is when we go into the detailed EIA, then we will see. In certain cases where it said this is an environmentally sensitive area, there's an area here when one of the councillors was asking me, what is there? It looks like there's houses, but at the current moment that map says that that's an environmentally sensitive area, and there was no way that I could cut through that with a conscience that says I can do whatever I want to do. So the maps themselves are composite, and when you look at them, you'll see just now. So this is the first one that we have to look at. You might be a bit far. So the yellow bits are ecological support area. Now I'll talk to you what an ecological support area is. And then the green bits are an important area. And then the sort of, what's the color, Mkhadi? Is it teal or light green? Teal, okay. So the sort of bluish color, and then the red parts are actually protected areas. So it's areas I cannot put anything through. And now the challenge with this is that when we start talking, so in certain cases they are neither important areas, irreplaceable areas, or protected areas, but they actually support. They are called an environmental support area. So they support another area. So you might find that you want to build here, but this area has a small stream that actually feeds another area down on the bottom. And that's what it's called an environmental support area. And as you can see, a lot of this land here, so in the area here on the corner, near the Cosmo station, and in the bend going towards the dome and past that, there's this big piece of land here that is regarded as an important area ecologically. And then down on the bottom here, there's another one. And when you can see is this line here, the red one up on the top. This is the line that actually goes through the PWV. the red one there. That's the line that goes through the PWV. But can you see when it exits? So in actual fact, when it goes into the area and then it exits it again, it actually fact cuts quite deeply into that environmentally sensitive area. And that in itself creates a problem on what is the best way. And when we look, and then you'll see, I'll show you the percentage by which each of the line actually affects all the areas. And it is the least impact. Remember where we started off? It's least impact, station location, gradients, and all the other, what do they call it, design considerations. And as you can see, in this area here, this red line, this one here on the top, that's the one that literally was put through that space in itself. The strangest thing is, the question that had to be asked is, can you even really build a road through there? Because now suddenly its exit point is there. And you can see all of these lines were pulled further and further back so that we get out first out of this area here. And this area here actually has a protected area cutting through the area here on the bottom part. And you can see we also had to consider the rivulets and the streams and the small, what do they call it, ponds and areas that we had to consider. Yes, ma'am? So all of that was taken into consideration as we were, what do they call it, as we were looking through all of this. And as you can see, our need was for us to pull out from areas where there will be much more damage, because all of these lines here, the ones that run here, the smaller green one there and the top red one, actually ended up being so deep in those areas you're talking about, in such a way that we could not be able to even prove that we can replace the areas. Yes, sir.
Okay, so on the 3 lines, which one has been confirmed, or it's likely
we will get to it. It's the ones that with the least impact. I'll get to it. So it is a combination of all these lines, because when you come out of something here, there's a bit of this combined with that, and then ultimately here, the 2 lines, parts of them merge together to be able to create the least impact. It's a hybrid of a number of lines. It wasn't just one. So the one that ultimately gets, what do they call it, shown to you. But I'm showing you the process that we had to go through. Because a lot of people tend to think that we just sat and drew a line on a map. There's technical considerations and environmental considerations that have to go into all of this.
When will you decide?
So ultimately then, this, what do they call it, shows you the ecologically sensitive areas, and in this one, it's a combination of the lines and all of that. And then what you end up is, you end up with these percentages. And these percentages talk about how much ecological support area does each of the lines take, how much important areas that each of the lines take, irreplaceable areas and protected areas by their nature. There was no way that I could actually be able to say, even by law, say that I will go into those areas and even say that there is a percentage that I can actually be able to consider. So this presentation will be made available to you guys. We've given it to the councillors and everything else, and they were supposed to actually ultimately distributed, but we will still make sure that it gets available to everybody. And as you can see, each one of these alternatives were rated according to how much, CBA they take, and important areas they take, ecological support areas they take. And as you can see, this alternative that sits here, but it is not all just like that, because we had to consider in certain cases an option that looked this well, but in certain care areas it was cutting through particular areas that were highly sensitive. So this is us considering the water courses. Now, so this is non-perennial and perennial, the river system here, and a lot of the perennial systems also we had to consider, where do we go underneath it, do we go on top of it, and if we go underneath it, is it going to dry it up? All these considerations, then by its nature, then it then comes to a point where, is this a bridge, is this a tunnel, is this, all of these things come into being once you start looking at all of this. And throughout the current Gautrain, the challenges we've had with some parts of the tunnel, and you might have heard about the water in the tunnel and permanently having it to be pumped and all that. These are some of the considerations that we have to bring back into this, because this is a permanent river. So in actual fact, whatever we do, it's either we're crossing it right on top, or we go so deep underneath it that it will not, it will keep the river still perennial, because in certain cases, if you have a shallow tunnel, it actually drains around the tunnel. Look, in certain places, drain tunnels that have a lining of water around it. A lot of the tunnels in the Swiss Alps and going through the Alps are actually cooled by the water that comes from the ice water on the mountain, and it's actually an intentional design. But we are an arid area, and as an arid area, there is no way that I'm going to have to cool my tunnel with water that would come from a river that sits on the top. So that would mean that this river here would cease to be a perennial river. This one will also be the same. And then we have small streams. There's a thing called a riparian zone. And a riparian zone by its nature, it's a watercourse. And watercourses by their nature, they fall into an area that supports another area. So remember we spoke about ecological support areas. They're actually ecological support areas. They might not run permanently, but by whatever water that runs either underneath them or the cyclic nature in which the water springs up and the greening of the area occurs and everything else, they actually find that this stream or this river here or rivulet that runs through here would actually dry up if we were to block that particular stream. So those are some of the things that we had to consider overall in looking at all of these. And then in terms of watercourses, again you can see we had to look at, this is the ones that have the higher impact and are going through a lot of wetlands. And alternative one, I think that's alternative one, the red one that runs through that KWV route, in itself has the challenge of things there. In itself has the challenge of running through that, and you can see it affects much more watercourses than any other route. Look, you asked me today, in the olden days, how that was determined as, what do they call it, as a prospective KWV route. I am not old enough to can be able to provide such answers. I don't know. So. And the environmental laws were not as stringent as they are today. Thank you, Victor. So this is the one that talks about threatened ecosystems. So the brownish part are critical areas, and this part here is what we call the Randburg Ridge, the Randburg Ridge, and then there's a lot of these areas that are still regarded as critical areas. I don't know what there, because I thought there was always mine dumps there. So maybe there's a frog that glows there somewhere. That's why it's a critical area. And then these are endangered areas. Now, this is what's important about this conversation. Now, this in itself, at face value, it means this line can be built. If you look at it at face value. The reason why we do a full EIA is for us now to then determine current land use and then superimpose that on any other environmental degradation that has already occurred. And then for that matter, then you might find that in some of the areas where it looks like we cannot go into that KWV route, it might be the best one, because but by their nature, because a lot of that land has been left open for a very long time, they are probably green belts at the current moment. So do we really still want to put a railway line through a green belt? And you might find that those becomes the more ecologically sensitive areas more than anything else, because they've been, remember, they have no houses on them and everything else. So this map says everything is in a threatened ecosystem, and therefore we have to tread carefully. And some of these things we will consider and look at them in detail. Now, alternative route 1 and endangered areas and sensitivities outcome of threatened ecosystem. I mean, all the routes go through that area, and it was on 100% all of the areas that are there. So these are the regions, there are people who protect the copies and everything else that we have around the cities, and a lot of our areas we have to consider where there's a copy. So if you consider this area here, which is a class 4 area, which means there's a definite no-go. Now this is the area where we're trying to turn the line from Randburg station out to where we put it in that PWV route. And suddenly it hits this ridge, and you'll see as we continue on with the detail of closer and closer to that area. It's a class 4 area, it means can't go. And then ultimately, now on ridges, that line hits only once, but alternative 2, which was the one that was next to it, hits a whole lot more copies. Alternative 3 again appears as the one that has the least environmental impact. So this is the Santen area and the departure from there, and you've got this class 4 area that has a challenge, and then this is the area at Marlborough on the other side. That's the EXK that it has its own problems, and we will have to look through how we put the line through there. But we already have a station there, and there's already existing land use that we can lean against. This is the Randburg station in itself, and the Randburg station, that's the red area that I was showing you earlier on, and then us going underneath that. Because of the copy here, we have to go in a bit of a tunnel in the current assessment, and then it cuts through. So a lot of more of the other alternatives for us to turn into that KWV route cuts into that red area there. And then this is the area near where we are, where we turn out towards the Soweto line, and this line here, as you look at it, so this area here has this red part here, that the parts of the line that then eventually we had to pick, we've pulled from the least impact ever, and all the other options go deeper and deeper into this area, go into this environmentally sensitive area, and then the other options that you're looking at up on the top there then go deeper and deeper into this, and that becomes the ability for us to replace such ecologically sensitive areas becomes a nightmare in itself. And in actual fact, some of the areas we cannot even do it. You cannot be able to consciously say, I will build a railway and I'll cut through deeply into an environmentally sensitive area like that. As you had raised it, ma'am, that it's what do they call it? That area there is demarcated by City of Johannesburg as being an ecologically important area. And therefore, the line had to be pulled back this way to get more and more out of the areas where we have much more impact than anything else. And ultimately, this is still a complex one, and because off here, then we have to go into the Randburg Ridge, and when we go into the Randburg Ridge in itself, we couldn't go over it because it's a no-go, because it supports the Walter Sisulu Botanical Gardens down on the bottom. So there's not much we can do there. We will have to carefully be able to go into the mountain and underneath it completely. And that has its own complexities as we continue with it. But as you can see, we've tried to put the line in such a way that we keep it out of cutting through too much. If we run it through there, as you can see the alternatives, the other alternatives, if we run it through there, it cuts through a whole lot more, a much bigger stretch. So these are actually reverse systems that are there, and we've tried to pick a line that cuts as little as possible of what do they call it, of those environmentally sensitive areas. And ultimately we had to come and say, what is the preferred route, and which of the, so there is no one route that gives you a, what do they call it, the ultimate, it is a least impact issue. And sometimes people think, no, these guys just sat on the map and just drew a line. We didn't just draw a line. We had to consider all these issues. So the half a mark is the one that says, yeah, but we can do something with it. And then the full marks is where, like, no, we can make it through that area. And then the red cross is just simply saying to you, you've got big problems more than anything else. So due to a design, alternative route 6 is the preferred route and is dependent on the assumption that the impacts of water courses as well as ecological support threatened areas can be mitigated. Now, I want to explain something about this. Victor said, when the MEC gets a route determination, he then asks a simple question. All the issues that have been raised and have been brought together, so first and foremost is there are no fatal flaws. There's nothing that goes through ecologically sensitive areas that we cannot replace at all. And we say, no, there's none of those. And then he then asks the question, the comments we've received from the public, can we manage them through design? Can we manage them through design? And the question gets asked, what does can we manage them through design mean? It means, can we be able to consider an alternative, whether it's at grade structure, is it an in the air structure, is it what do they call it? So is it a viaduct or is it a tunnel? And once we say yes, then he then says, well, this does not need to go to a commission. But when we say to him, there are areas where we cannot do anything, we're going to have to go through either that area or that area, like there's no engineering design that can mitigate that. Then we have a problem, because then at that point in time, then he sends us back. Now here's the issue that comes up. As part of the processes that continue on, when we do the EIA, if fatal flaws do appear, at that point in time we need to detail studies. And I'll give you an example. So where the deposits at the current moment on the current how terrain, there's a type of grass that is discovered there that it grows only there. It's called egoli grass. And the issue was, so the depot was further on up the hill. And the issue was, do we build in the egoli grass? And if we're building in the egoli grass, where do we move the egoli grass to? But this egoli grass grows on a specific type of strata. And when we looked around all over the place, there was no place that we could have moved the egoli grass to. And that in itself became a fatal flaw. So therefore the depot had to be moved out of there and then be moved near an existing quarry that already had the environmental degradation that was already existing. Now that is the kind of process we're still going to follow. There's still going to be the details in the design. Somebody would ask, why do we do a preliminary design? In terms of what they call it, of the PPP legislation, and when you take the PPP itself, then what we don't give is we don't give the final design to the prospective people who are going to build. It's actually a 10-key contract. They then do the detailed design. We give them what we call an output spec. This is how we want the railway line to run, and therefore we need you to give us a product back that actually satisfies the regulations and the law of the land and does not create a lot of environmental impact. And the question that is always asked is, the water courses as well as the ecological support areas threatened can be mitigated. Can we mitigate it? Now, the law allows that in certain cases, if the damage is minimized, and remember what I kept on saying, it's about minimum impact. If the damage is minimized and we can prove that we can either replace the area somewhere else or we can do something else that sort of offsets the minimized damage, then we then are allowed to continue with the process. But if we can't, then it becomes a bit of a challenging issue. I want to go to a point at which I can continue with the slides, but we've shared the slides with everybody, and then there's the issue that talks to the law and what it follows through. Throughout the entire process, on stage 1, we've started the process of community engagement and stakeholder engagement. When we get to the detailed design in itself before it even goes to the MEC, because the MEC won't look at it unless it's got an environmental impact assessment with it. And that environmental impact assessment will include the issues of, the social impacts that relate to all of this. All the issues that relate to how much land gets taken up, which properties are affected, and then ultimately the environmental sensitivity that goes with all of that. And the input from the community. The full, so throughout the process, then we go past the, what do they call it? We've managed the issues through the preliminary design. And then we go into a process where now, whatever land that gets taken up, then we now make sure that the process is complete with all the property owners. And then only after that, then do we then go to the ultimate language of, what do they call it, of expropriating and doing the final setup that is there. Let's have the conversation now. I think I'd rather go there.
Sorry, some people are starting to leave.
Okay.
I'd like a few questions that I want to
No, that is fine. That is why I've
But I
stopped.
don't want to interrupt you. How long is this going to go?
No, I've stopped.
Are you finished now?
I'm going to stop it here, but we will share the presentation with you. That's why I had said I am going to stop now, and I'd rather have us have a conversation.
I need some light. Can I stand by a light?
That's one, you can stand by the light here. I don't know which one is mine, but
Oh, thank you.
no, I will have to answer you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Sorry. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? It's the second presentation. Can you hear me? It's the second presentation that I have been to. So I've got a few questions directly and with hindsight, what I've read, and I haven't stopped reading since my first attendance. So just bear with me for a few minutes. The GMA, Gautrain Management Agency, website states, critical to the GMA mandate is to ensure that the Gautrain system operates in a sustainable manner. The Gautrain Management Agency of 2017-18 annual report revealed that Gauteng taxpayers were paying 100 million a month or 1.6 billion a year to subsidize the running of the Gautrain. This is all from press releases. This was 4 years ago for the current Gautrain network comprising of only 80 kilometers of rail with 10 stations. What is the government subsidy today? This is 4 years ago. I want to know what it's today. Secondly, the new expansion comprised double the distance of 150 kilometers rail and 19 stations. What is the estimated government subsidy for this route per annum? Will it be double that, which is 3 billion, of which we as taxpayers will fund? On 16 August, the Gauteng Portfolio Committee, Legislatory Portfolio Committee on Roads and Transport convened to discuss the viability of the Gautrain expansion. Recording of the objections of residents is legally required, and which the August meeting confirmed has been largely ignored. I can add, the Sharon Lee Olivedale meeting on 13 July at Blandford Manor was attended by at least 200 people, of which not all have been registered, maybe 2/3. August 2021, hundreds of online objections from Gauteng were submitted, of which about 57 only objections were recorded. Is there going to be an online objection process in the pipeline to record every objection? I'm asking that you please remember the following. The objections of expropriation of the land and heavy losses of the 13 July Sharon Lee meeting were mentioned in the Randburg Sun on 3 August and consequently at 16 August, but not the suggestion of tunneling rather than overhead tracking. We pleaded for that at the last meeting. It also did not mention the critically negative effect on the adjacent Olivedale Retirement Village with 417 owners and their life-saving investments with no further additional income. Currently, we are all in limbo in the entire Sharon Lee, where the rail will rip through from west to east, destroying their massive security system of at least 90 security cameras, as well as the Olivedale South, until 2026, when I'm told it begins and ends 1 or 2 years later, however long it will take. I'm asking you to seriously consider rather tunneling underneath the Sharon Lee or Malibongwe, keeping in mind that you've just told us that it's between 600 and 1.8 in some areas, in other areas between 80 and 400 meters. At the Begalisburg meeting, the chairman of the Gautrain legislature requested the GMA again to reduce the ridership rate of the Marlborough station for the adjacent Alexander residents. The 16 August meeting also mentioned the failure of catering for lower income groups. Have you taken note of this? The AA said in a recent June 2022 article, there's no justifiable reason why the Gautrain service should be extended, and we noted such in our submission. We have had no formal feedback to our concerns, this is the AA, and it is perhaps now time that national government and Parliament hold the Gauteng provincial government, the MEC and the GMA accountable for spending billions of rands of taxpayer money on what is essentially a vanity project of the province and not as a sustainable public transport solution. Have you taken note of this? And finally, what is your reaction, Mr. COO, to the press release in the engineering news of 17 August, re the 16 August meeting, and I quote, this is now at the 16 August in Sandton, the Gautrain extension was harshly criticized as a white elephant, a vanity project, and a waste of government funds, and will go ahead regardless of the public's concern. All these meetings, regardless, because the decision to build it had already been made, and the GMA was merely ticking the boxes to satisfy the legally required process. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, sir. I don't know how many more we're going to have, but this is ticking another box.
So then, let's have the conversation, and for me, it's about us having the conversation. There's a legal requirement for what I'm doing, so the ability for you to then say, I am ticking boxes. I'd really like to spend a bit more time with you. There's a wide set of issues you've raised in the document you've just read now. But I'd like to really have a conversation with you, and so I have a PPP manual, which is a legal document which governs the manner in which such projects run. The approvals I need to get comes from there. In what way am I ticking boxes? No, I'm not saying that, ma'am. I'm just simply going through what do they call it.
Sir, I was quoting from an article from the AA and from the engineering news at a meeting that I don't know if you were there on the 16th of August. Were you there?
I was there in all the meetings, ma'am.
Colleague, what is his
Mr. Dax.
Sorry?
Mr. Dax.
Correct. I can send you the article. Please can you answer to them? I'm not interested. I'm retired. I live in Olivedale Retirement Village. Half my neighbors will be ripped out. Do you know how long is half of 400 meters? That's half a kilometer. That's the distance between Olivedale Retirement Village and Malibongwe. We asked you, we pleaded with you to look at tunneling. You talk about the whole night about presentations and getting the MEC that will come back with recommendations and in different phases. We have not, according to this, had any reaction. The last meeting there were 250 people, I'm repeating myself. Half of them, three-quarters of them were registered. Where's the other lot? 57 objections after
No, I'm
I
up.
don't need to talk to you privately, sir. You need to talk to the AA who's still waiting for a reply, or your NSC, and you need to go back to the people that your colleague, you just told me what his name is, from the 16th of August, they are the people that said this. They're ticking off the boxes. Go and address them, not me.
Okay, that's fine, ma'am.
So I have nothing to communicate with you.
Okay, that's fine, ma'am. You've got nothing to communicate with me then. So there's a process that we will follow, and we had promised in that particular meeting that we will go back to all the comments that we've received online. We are going through them one by one and making sure that we answer each of the questions as it's intended to do. And we did appeal in the same meeting, the CEO did say in the same meeting that the process of answering the questions will continue on. The same way we have made sure that every other comment that has been raised, we are actually attending to it. Now, the issue of the suggestion of a tunnel, we did say we will go into a design, a detailed design, and we will consider that as the options, as part of the options that are there for what to do with the line. We keep on saying is there's a preliminary design that must unfold beyond this point. Now, can I give you an answer that says I will put it in tunnel immediately now? Let the preliminary design and the process take care of that. Now, in essence, I understand, ma'am, you are angry and what do they call it, and you are unhappy about the process, but I am putting it through is that we have to follow process.
So where do you live?
I live in Midrand.
Right. Are you living near this? How far are you from here?
About 5 kilometers away.
We've been listening to environmental screening, to where the route's going to be start at Little Falls. We live in here. I couldn't even see where the streets are because of these maps that we are sitting here listening for about an hour, and before that your colleague, greatest of respect, I don't know if it was together, you presented it. We are interested. These people that ask questions, what is the value? Your predecessor said, I don't know, but I'm going to guess now. And he gave a guesstimate. These people are not looking for guesstimates. They're in limbo for 2026. They can't sell a house. They can't find maybe a tenant. It's some people live since they were born in these houses. You are ripping the entire Sharon Lee away. Maybe this primary school will be gone. You can't even get there. You will split the whole neighborhood. The Sharon Lee is only half a kilometer wide. It's as wide as, it's narrower than 1.4 kilometers. Do you know what you are talking about when you talk about an overhead? We are pleading with you to go underground. And sorry, I am upset because guess what? I don't live there. That'll run past my back door. But I bleed for these people. There was a woman in the last meeting. You couldn't answer her. She's selling. She's moving to Cape Town. I don't know where she is. There were 300 people, 250. You registered not even 180. She was saying to you, I'm going to sell. I don't know. It's all in the news. Who the hell is going to buy? And you're telling me, I know it's going to start in 2026 and it's going to last about 2 years at least. And you're telling me, oh, but the NEC will decide, and the NEC will do that. Yes, I am upset. And I'm upset because none of the comments and reactions have been fed back. All we hear is the NEC will say, nothing further. Well, I forget it now, I can sleep now, but I don't, but I feel like that when I wake up in the morning. Because you live 5 kilometers away from the train, and the other night when we had the other meeting, you told me by 2026, somewhere around there, you're retiring. You know it. How long before you retire? Do you really care what these people feel like?
Yeah, I think so. All right. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So I've got 2 questions. So that 400.
I can't see, sir, sorry.
So yeah, that 400-meter corridor.
Yep.
I know there's a map there. Is there a more detailed one of where that actually goes? If I look at sort of the North Riding area goes, it follows Malibongwe. It looks like that, but I don't know if that's really accurate. So that 400-meter corridor, can we get a more clearer...
Yes, one of the maps that I said I'll provide you with a
Alright.
picture background.
We've registered this morning. Will that come through on email, or how will we get it?
Yes.
Because that'll give us a good idea of where within that 400 meter that line will go. And then my next question is the final detailed sort of how many years do we have before this is where the line is going? So it's 2022 now.
Yep.
More or less, how many years do we have?
So as I had explained, sir, that, once I get what do they call it, a treasury approval one, which I've been waiting for a while. What that means is that then I go into the design in itself. And that design then starts the next bit of interaction with the communities and everything else. So let's say I get it now. So the initial bit of the preliminary design report, I will get it within a 12 to 18 months period, which will then be shared with the residents, and then that will now be getting to a point where we're crystallizing the numbers. Now the final report, as I had explained earlier on, we're looking at a 24 to what do they call it, to 36 months period, where now this is the final area that gets depicted, and these are the properties that have been affected overall. And then ultimately, with the EIA process, that adds another 300 days into the process of what do they call it, of the interaction with the design itself. 2026, 2027.
26, 27.
Yes. And that's me saying to you, once I get the treasury approval one, which is part of the PPP manuals, regulation 16 of the PFMA. Yeah. Okay. So parts of it go through Malibongwe, parts of it go through Olivedale. But the issue that I keep on raising about the design, say, is very important, because what we would have to do is look at consideration. Is this in a tunnel? Is this on a viaduct? Is at grade? All these things would have to be looked at as part of the design. So, and I still say, all of the comments that have been raised, all the issues that have been raised on the areas that people believe that this should go into tunnel and all of that, we will consider all of that. It's part of a design process. And it's not a, what do they call it? I'm an engineer, and I cannot say to you, like, it's going to be in design, it's going to be in tunnel. I cannot say that. The design has to determine that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Have studies been done? The majority of people living in these areas that the Gautrain is going to service, is using the Gautrain going to be an economically viable option for them? I'm thinking about Cosmo City. I'm thinking about the people that work in the Kaya Sands area. I'm thinking about, are they going to be able to afford a Gautrain ride, a Gautrain ticket for a month? Or is a taxi option, is it going to be out of the question? Is this, it's just a worry, a concern for me.
No, that's good, ma'am. It's a good question. So as part of the study, when we submitted it, what do they call it, to Treasury, one of the questions that were asked was very specific, and it was that if we're taking this, the line to Soweto, could we actually have preferential rates for certain areas? And we have done the study, and we are actually in the process of being able to trial some of those on the current Gautrain, to include places like Marlborough and all of that, to make it affordable for people in those areas. So there will be, what do they call it, an affordable rate that is put into places like that. No,
Part of the question.
Yeah.
For the majority of the people that you want to service.
No,
The current cost.
it was raised by Treasury, ma'am. Yes, and we have answered for that, and it's part of the study as a whole.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question. Is this project going ahead? Is it going to happen? Or is this, maybe are we just thinking about having these expansions? I'm asking this question, Sweet Treasure says we don't have money, or maybe wait until 2030 when we recover. Are we going to have to wait until 2030?
That's what Treasury decides say. That's why I have to get the Treasury approval one. If Treasury comes back to me now and says, no, there isn't any money and there isn't going to be any money until 2030, then resubmit your, what do they call it, resubmit your proposal then in 2030. Then I'll have to redo the whole feasibility study, do the route determination again and all sorts of other things, because by law the study would have lapsed and would have, some of the detail that backs it up in terms of its demand would have been probably in excess of 5 to 10 years old.
Yeah, but you don't think it's unfair? Well, we'll wait for Treasury to see if they'll give you funds, but if they don't give you funds as and when you anticipate, then I think then the project should then collapse, because we can't have people waiting for 30 years who are unable to sell. Some people have decided if you're going ahead, go ahead, let's see what happens afterwards.
Yep.
Some people are trying to object, but at one point we need to either move or abandon the project.
Yes, I hear you, and I'd like to give you a much more detailed answer, but I am subject to the laws of this country that govern the process that I have to follow. I have to await the Treasury approval. In actual fact, as of today, we were actually saying to them the same thing, that we can't keep everybody in limbo. We have to actually get an answer. And if they say no, it's say no. And then we know that the project is not going ahead. And then we can tell you that the project is canned. I am subject to the constitution that we all are under and the laws that emanate from that constitution.
That's it. We'll just go one more question here and then we're going to close.
Yep. It's not from my team, is it?
No.
Okay. I was getting worried there for a minute.
Okay, it's happened.
Yeah.
I just want to know, because my concern is what was raised by the lady who's sitting over there. At present moment, does Gautrain able to sustain itself? How much revenue does it generate, let's say, per year? Is it able to sustain itself? Is it profitable for the Gauteng municipalities? Is it able to sustain the jobs? Is it not a liability to us as Gauteng people?
Okay, so the level of what we call of understanding of what we're paying for. So when you do a PPP, there is debt that is acquired by both the public party and the private party. Now, in essence, a lot of the money we're paying is to service the original debt that was brought on by the PPP itself. You understand that? Now, let's look at what they call at similar railway lines and a railway line like ours. So throughout probably the 10 years of the operations of the line, most of these railway lines, we require them to do two things: cover operation costs and cover maintenance. And that I am comfortable that the current system is able to do that. And then the up and above that we actually pay additional for is to service the original debt that was brought on to build Gautrain 1. Now, everybody calls this a subsidy, whereas at the level at which the prices are, if the prices were not at that level and you have to cut them down to an even lower price, then that's when you go into subsidies. Now, what it also doesn't cover, it doesn't cover what we call renewals. Renewals is like OPEX, it's like when you're plowing money back into the system to replace turnouts, replace damaged stations and all sorts of other things. That I'm comfortable about it. There's probably, I think, around the world about 5 systems that actually cover their own cost when it comes to renewals. And even those, after COVID, none of them have recovered back to where they were. All this detail comes from a World Bank study and I can share it with you. So it's not, I'm not swacking by its nature. So when you can get to what we call the break-even point, where you can cover your operations and cover your, what do they call it, your day-to-day maintenance, or what we call running shed maintenance on the train and the regular maintenance of the train, then you're already at the right point. But for us to be able to get to the level where now you can cover your renewals, so the renewals require you to be at 1.4 or 140% of the fare box itself, or your intake of your revenue. So that's when you start looking at things like what we're looking at, where you do your own developments around stations. And the lines that, what do they call it? So the MTRs, the Metro Links in Canada, the Crossrails and all of that, they're built around property development. And the property development is what brings on the cost that cross-subsidizes the railway and the railway fare itself. Now, everybody says, no, the Gautrain must become like those lines. But we are trying to do that by trying to build in areas where we can have developments. And those developments then will then bring the additional revenue that will get us first to be able to cover our renewals. And once you cover your renewals, then there isn't any money that, what do they call it? So beyond that, then we're talking pure profitability. And that's the economics of running a railway line. And that study can be shared with you, and even, what do they call it, the subsequent impacts that have happened on COVID overall, I have no problem with sharing it with you, sir. So that we can make sure that we all have the same understanding. What is getting paid for? And where does what do they call the Gautrain sit in relative to, what do they call it, to international cities and, the Hong Kongs and all of that? It's actually a property company with a railway line that runs through it, MTR. Singapore is similar to that, and that's the manner in which is, what do they call it, has been set up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tepo. I just wanted to close, and before everyone leaves, I just also want to move the lights, because of the load shedding at the venue, into the corridor, so that you can sort of see your way out, so you don't stumble on any chair that might be sitting in the corridor. And then also, I also forgot to introduce myself in my opening. I didn't mention my name. So I'm Councillor Devin Steenkamp for Ward 134. And I know you guys took out your time to come and listen to this meeting, because it's very important for you, because it might impact you directly. There is an email address if you want to get any more questions answered to Gautrain, and that's at phase1@gautrainrapidrail.co.za. And then also, if you've registered your details on the tablet when you enter the venue, I will get those email addresses, and I'm going to send you the documents as well, so you can review more in detail. There's a one PDF document that really shows more in detail where it goes above ground, below ground, etc. But thanks again for coming. Take care.